There are 10 parts to Qlik Sense server recovery. We start with recovering certificates, then installing PostgreSQL server, running a command to recover contents of the PostgreSQL server, so things like databases and users and indexes. Then we run a command to generate optimizer statistics, install Qlik Sense, install Qlik Sense patch if your backed up version had a patch installed on it. We recover directories, update server hostname, update certificates template in proxy settings in QMC, and if you had your backups automated, the last part would be, or the last step would be, to recover backup scripts and tasks. My name is Mikhail. I own howdash.com, and I have been deploying, securing, and recovering Qlik Sense servers for more than 6 years, and now I'm here sharing what I've learned throughout my career to save you some time and effort learning these things on your own. So let's jump in and try to take a closer look at these steps and make some sense out of them and see the order in which they would need to be taken, that you would need to execute these steps under different recovery scenario. Now, we'll start with making a little bit more sense of them. In the previous video where I was talking about backing up, what needs to be backed up when backing up a Qlik Sense server, I had this visual. I mentioned that the 3 things that need to be backed up are certificates, contents and settings of PostgreSQL server, and directories. Now, backups and recovery are very much related. We do backups so that we could recover a Qlik Sense server. Now, going back to these recovery steps, let's add some color to them to see which step is associated with which backup component. So here they are. So very first one is certificates. We backed up the certificates and we recover those same certificates. This blue section here deals with recovering of PostgreSQL server. The purple one deals with recovering directories, and the green one, this one only is applicable if you have your backups automated, but if you do, you would also back up and recover backed up scripts and tasks to make sure that your recovered Qlik Sense server will continue to be backed up post-recovery. And the remaining 4 points not really deal with the data of the Qlik Sense server, but the Qlik Sense server itself. So points 5 and 6 deal with installing Qlik Sense itself and patching it. And the last 2 points are applicable only when you're recovering your Qlik Sense server on a different machine. And these are the post-recovery configuration steps. So let's take a look at some of the recovery scenarios that you may come across and to kind of make sense of which of these steps you would need to pick under which scenarios, and to kind of give a little bit more context in realistic situations that you will come across in your career. So there are 3 common recovery scenarios that you may come across. First one is when you need to roll back an upgrade. This one is pretty straightforward. You've installed an upgrade to your Qlik Sense server and either didn't really go well and you need to try again, or something was actually wrong with an upgrade, so you need to roll back your Qlik Sense server to the previous version that it was installed on. In this scenario, you typically would be recovering your Qlik Sense server on the same server as it was originally. It's a simple rollback, and there's no need to really, in most cases, to bring in a new server. The other scenario where you would need to recover Qlik Sense server from backups would be when you're migrating your Qlik Sense server from its current machine to a newer, more powerful server. A migration effort is really just a backup of your server and then recovering it on a new machine. So in this case, you would be recovering your Qlik Sense server on a different server, which would mean that you have a couple extra steps that you would need to take as part of the recovery process. And the last one, luckily I haven't came across the need to recover Qlik Sense due to server hardware failure, but that is another reason why you might be needing to recover your Qlik Sense server. And that, depending on the severity of the failure, you might be recovering your Qlik Sense on the same or a different machine. So, if a hardware or a hard drive failed and you just swap one hard drive for the other one, you likely will be recovering your Qlik Sense server on the same machine. But if it's something more severe, like a motherboard got fried, you will likely need to bring back your Qlik Sense server on a different machine. So this kind of gives you a context, hopefully, that there are two paths to recovering Qlik Sense. They are either recovering Qlik Sense on the original server or on a different one. And the other two options, where that will determine which steps you would take and in which order, is whether your backed up version of Qlik Sense was using a bundled or standalone installation of PostgreSQL. So, if you're recovering your Qlik Sense server that had a bundled installation of PostgreSQL and you're recovering it on your original server, so think like rolling back an upgrade, you would follow one set of steps, recovery steps. But if you're recovering a bundled installation, Qlik Sense server with bundled installation of PostgreSQL on a different machine, then you would follow a slightly different set of steps. You have those two extra steps that you would need to take to get your Qlik Sense server essentially acclimated to the new machine. And the same thing would happen when you're recovering a Qlik Sense with standalone installation of PostgreSQL, and when you're recovering it on Qlik Sense with standalone PostgreSQL on a different server. So let's take a look at this first option here, recovering a bundled Qlik Sense with a bundled installation of PostgreSQL on the original server. So this is, again, when you need to this is the scenario that you would come across when you need to roll back a server upgrade. So when you're dealing with that situation, you would follow these 7 steps. So it's not 10, it's 7. And the order of the steps, you start with certificates. That, by the way, is the first step for every scenario. We always recover certificates first. That's the starting point. Then you would install Qlik Sense. Now, during the installation of Qlik Sense, you will see this screen right here. This is where it's going to ask you, do you want to essentially install a bundled installation of PostgreSQL or connect your Qlik Sense server to a standalone installation of PostgreSQL. Now, since we're talking about the bundled, recovering Qlik Sense with bundled installation of PostgreSQL, you would go with this create new database option, which would install a bundled installation of PostgreSQL. Later on in the installation process, by the way, you would need to uncheck this checkbox right here that says, start the Qlik Sense services when the setup is complete. You don't want to start your Qlik Sense server during the recovery process. The reason why not is because there are at this step, we've only recovered certificates. There still need to be, we still need to recover contents of PostgreSQL. We still need to recover directories and do a bunch of other things. Backup tasks will need to be recovered. So you don't want the Qlik Sense server to be running just yet. So just make sure to uncheck this checkbox when you get to the end of the installation of Qlik Sense. So once you have Qlik Sense installed, the next thing you would do is install Qlik Sense patch. And You would only do this if your backed up version had a patch installed. And by the way, if you're not sure, you can skip this step. When you're going to boot up your Qlik Sense server after recovery, you can log on to QMC and you will see this text at the bottom of the start page in QMC. That's going to tell you whether or not your backed up version had a patch installed. So yes, even if you install just the initial release of the Qlik Sense version, and then you complete the recovery process, but your backed up version had a patch installed, the patch information is actually going to be retained here. So in this case, if you see, if you installed, you've completed the recovery process and you booted up your Qlik Sense server and it tells you that the backed up version had a patch installed, but you didn't install a patch, go ahead and bring down your Qlik Sense server, just shut down the services and install the patch. If you don't, you won't be able to use your Qlik Sense server. But it's a very easily fixed problem. Just for context, if you complete the recovery server without installing the patch, you won't be able to load apps in the hub, so it will be pretty obvious. But again, the solution here is just simply install the patch that was missing. And if you install it after the fact, you boot up your Qlik Sense server, it's going to work fine. So that's the Qlik Sense portion. So once you complete the patch installation, you'll have your certificates, you'll have Qlik Sense installed and patched, and then you would move on to the recovery of the contents of the PostgreSQL server. So there is a command that you would run, this one, or very similar to this one, that you can use to recover the contents of PostgreSQL server. So it's a pretty straightforward command. You use the PSQL binary, provide a port number, provide the user name that you would like to use to do the recovery. Provide a path to the SQL script that contains contains all the data and settings that need to be recovered in your Qlik Sense server, and you specify that you're going to be using the default template one to create databases. This is something that's PostgreSQL specific. So this would be a command as simple as that. You would run it and that would bring back all of the contents of your PostgreSQL server. After that, you would run a command to generate something that's called optimizer statistics. So when Qlik Sense is installed, or when PostgreSQL is installed and it's populated with the data, PostgreSQL needs to get some sort of metadata or statistics that it can use for its optimizer. So this, for context, there is this, it's kind of like a brain of PostgreSQL that determines, that's used to make sure that PostgreSQL is running at an optimal level. And this command right here is what you would use to generate the statistics that the PostgreSQL needs to make sure that the query that it receives and how it processes those queries run at optimal level. So you run this command after you've recovered the contents of your PostgreSQL server, and your PostgreSQL server is going to be nice and snappy. So once you run that, you will have your certificates, Qlik Sense install, contents of PostgreSQL brought back, and PostgreSQL is ready to run at the optimal level, at which point you would run or recover the directory. So there's, if in the previous video, again, there are 4 common directories that you would want to back up, and those same common directories you would recover at this point, plus anything else, any other directories that are specific to your company or your team that you would need to be recovered, you would recover them at this stage. Now, once you have your directories recovered, this is when you can actually start your Qlik Sense server and check to make sure everything is back to the way it was, and everything is fine. And the final step you would complete is bring back the recovery scripts and tasks that would continue to back up your newly recovered Qlik Sense server. Now, again, this is the scenario where you're recovering a bundled Qlik Sense with bundled installation of PostgreSQL on the server where it was installed originally. If you're recovering a Qlik Sense with bundled installation of PostgreSQL on a different machine, you would take the same steps, but you would run a command to recover, to upgrade server hostname. And that command looks like this. So it's repository.exe and then a handful of parameters. So it's bootstrap, standalone, and restore hostname. Once you run this command, that's going to it's essentially a binary that or an executable that Qlik has built for us, Qlik Sense admins, that we can use to make sure that Qlik Sense, when recovered on a different machine, gets acclimated to that machine and will be able to operate on this new server. And then once you run that command, you would also need to update certificates thumbprint. So typically a certificate, and specifically the certificate that's being used to secure communications between client PCs and your Qlik Sense server. So I think like employees have their own computers when they're using to connect to the hub, and you may or may not use a certificate to secure this communication between employee PCs and your Qlik Sense server within your organization. If you do, you would need to get a new certificate for this new machine, install that certificate, because the old certificate, that one is really tied to that original server. Even if you have that certificate when you're recovering it on a new server, the browsers of employee PCs are not going to really trust that certificate, so they'll, the employees will see an error message that essentially says, the connection is not trusted. So to avoid all of that, you would need to get a certificate for the new server, install the certificate, and then once you have your Qlik Sense recovered, you boot it up and just swap the certificate thumbprint in proxy settings in QMC. Replace the thumbprint from the old server with the certificate and its thumbprint for the new server. And then, of course, backup, restore the backup scripts and tasks. So that's what you would do when you're working with a Qlik Sense server that uses bundled installation of PostgreSQL, and those are the processes or the steps that, in the order of those steps, that you would follow when recovering on the same or different machine. Next, let's take a look at the flow of steps and the specific steps that you would follow when you're covering Qlik Sense server that used a standalone installation of PostgreSQL, and same order when you're covering the Qlik Sense on the original or different server. So we'll start with recovering a Qlik Sense with standalone version of PostgreSQL on the original server. Again, think rolling back the upgrades. To recover a Qlik Sense server with standalone installation of PostgreSQL on the original server, you would follow pretty much the exact same steps. You would start with the recovering of certificates, but unlike with bundled installation of PostgreSQL, you would have to start with installing PostgreSQL, a standalone version. So you would install PostgreSQL, run the same command to recover the contents of the PostgreSQL server, create optimizer statistics. Nothing is different. The only difference here is that instead of installing Qlik Sense, you install PostgreSQL first. Now, once you have your certificates recovered and PostgreSQL ready to go and is populated with the content that it had when you back it up, then you install Qlik Sense, and again, you would use that other option during the installation where you would say, connect to existing PostgreSQL database and then you do the configuration and get Qlik Sense connected during the installation process to the standalone version of PostgreSQL. Once that's done, you install Qlik Sense patch if your backed up version of Qlik Sense had a patch installed on it, and recover the directories and restore backup scripts and tasks if you have your backups automated. So nothing really massively different. Really, it's just the order of, do you install Qlik Sense first or do you install PostgreSQL first. In the case of standalone installation of PostgreSQL, you install PostgreSQL first and then you install Qlik Sense. And again, just like with the bundled installation of PostgreSQL, if you're recovering your Qlik Sense server on a different machine, you do have to have these two extra steps where you run a command to get Qlik Sense essentially acclimated to the new server. The command will update server hostname wherever is applicable, and then you swap the certificate thumbprint in the proxy settings of QMC. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it's clear now, and all these 10 steps are a little bit easier to see and understand. This is the process in the map that I wish I had when I started working on Qlik Sense server. This is really it. This is the process for recovering Qlik Sense and the 4 different options that you may come across. Now, the last thing I wanted to cover are some prerequisites when recovering a Qlik Sense server, and the ideal situation here, that the thing that I aim to have when thinking of Qlik Sense recovery is readiness. And what that means is you would have a fully configured Windows server on standby. So whether you're preparing for things like hardware failure or migration of your Qlik Sense server, before you start a recovery, you want to have a machine that is ready to that's really just missing the Qlik Sense on it. So it will be fully configured, so things like applicable software is installed. So think about Visual Studio Code or PG Admin, or any other tools that you may be using to run and administer your Qlik Sense would already be on that server. The certificate to secure these client-server communications would need to be obtained, was already obtained and installed. Again, this is more applicable for when recovering Qlik Sense on a new machine than on the same machine, but something to keep in mind. Firewall rules, any firewall rules that you may have created for your Qlik Sense server would already be done and on the standby server. Things like shared root folder for Qlik Sense is created and secured, and things like PowerShell along with applicable modules would be installed and configured. This is mostly applicable if you have, again, if your backups are automated, as well as credentials for PostgreSQL super users added to Credential Manager. That one's also applicable only for backup automations. So this is something that I aim to have on my standby servers. So if something goes wrong with my Qlik Sense server, I have a server that is ready to that I can use to just bring back Qlik Sense with minimal interruptions. So the other thing I wanted to cover, the last thing, is some considerations. So when recovering Qlik Sense, time is like the important element of it, and to minimize the amount of time it takes to recover a Qlik Sense server, you want to be prepared for the recovery ahead of time. And the biggest thing that you want to be to prepare and address ahead of time are any dependencies on other teams within your organization. So think about things like Windows Server configurations. So if you need a new server to recover your Qlik Sense server and that server needs to be configured, you want to make sure that that server is configured ahead of time, like before you need to recover. Because if your Qlik Sense server crashes at 2 in the morning and you have to like rush into the office to get it recovered, and you don't have a server configured and ready for you to recover your Qlik Sense server on, and you have to reach out to some other teams, this is like just delays the time of the recovery longer and longer and longer. So if you have if you get those things addressed ahead of time and work with the teams to set up your standby server and get it configured, get firewall rules created, get certificate issued for it and installed, and it's just ready, this will minimize any delays that are associated with your the recovery of Qlik Sense server. So that's really it. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it made the Qlik Sense server recovery process cleaner and clearer to see and understand. There's still a lot to it, and I will be releasing a new course that's coming out tomorrow, actually, May 8th. I'm super excited about it. It has really everything that you would need to do things like to automate your backups. I have scripts that I've written and used to back up Qlik Sense services, and Qlik Sense servers, and I've included those scripts in a course. It contains things like lessons for how to upgrade Qlik Sense and how to patch Qlik Sense and how to update certificates that are being used by a Qlik Sense server, how to upgrade bundled and standalone PostgreSQL servers. I have included a Qlik Sense app that I use to QA PostgreSQL upgrades to make sure that the data in your old version of PostgreSQL and new version matches. And the entire process, step by steps, outlining exactly how to go about recovering a Qlik Sense server from recovering certificates all the way down to recovering backup tasks and scripts. So I've put in more than 2,000 hours into building that course, into finding the answers to these, into making sure it's all the things are tested and work on variety of installation types for Qlik Sense servers, and it's built on more than 6 years of my career building and deploying and configuring and maintaining Qlik Sense servers in real corporate environments. So I'm super excited to release that course. I hope it's going to serve you well, save you a whole bunch of time and effort into finding the answers to how to do all these things. In the meantime, let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the Qlik Sense server recovery process. And also let me know if there's anything else that you would want me to cover as far as Qlik Sense server administration goes. If there's some contents or questions that you have, do you want to be answered, or if there's some sort of a video that already exists but you wish it was explained differently, let me know and I'll do my best to create it for you. And in the meantime, I'll see you in the next video.